Greetings, brothers and sisters. Welcome again to another edition of the Chrissy B Emotep segment. So we thank you so much for your participation, as always. It's a blessing to be here again with you once more. For those of you new to the channel, because we get new viewers all the time and subscribers. But for those of you who are new, if you've seen this for the first time, we'd like you to subscribe to our channel for content on reggae music, on Afro spirituality, on truths and rights, on the latest in the black communities around the world, mostly black music and reggae music, but we do these other things as well when it's the right time. We say subscribe to our channel, spread the word about Chrissy B Emotep, like our videos, you know, share them, because if you like our videos, it helps with the algorithms and on YouTube, and it enables YouTube to actually promote our videos, share them around, and we get more viewers, more subscribers, and more likes, and it helps. And then, as I said, I've been saying for a while now, when we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're going to start giving away some prizes, maybe 2, maybe 3. We're going to start giving away prizes, but that's only for UK viewers only. We're not going to be sending things overseas, only for the UK viewers and subscribers to our channel. And then but when the time comes, when we get 1,000 subscribers, then we'll give away maybe 2, maybe 3 prizes. Also, I was going to say also that, you know, we want to say thank you so much for the subscribers, because the last 3 weeks we've had some new subscribers. We've had a lot of views as well, so we thank you so much for your participation, for your support, for your help. Some of the comments you leave thanking me for the things I do, it's much appreciated. I'm Chrissy B Emotep. Some people just call me Chrissy B, and I'm here to give you a short video about dancehall. Many of you are probably thinking, dancehall? Yes, dancehall. You know, this is just a short video because I was at home one day. I think this was maybe about 2 months ago, and I overheard a conversation on the radio. It was somebody on one of the radio stations. It was a lady, a young lady, talking about dancehall, and she was talking about some tunes. She was playing some early 80s tunes with Johnny Osborne and Sugar Minott and those guys. And she was sort of saying that, she was kind of sort of talking about when it started, you know, and so on. And then there's some late 80s music in there as well. And she was sort of like coming to the conclusion that possibly dancehall started in the late 80s. And then she was but she was making some very good points, but some of the things she was saying was wrong, I have to say. And then I've heard other conversations around it as well since then. People sort of thinking of when it started, what in dance. But I must say, dancehall was really around the 1950s, because if you speak to some of the older artists, people such as Ken Booth, Alton Ellis, I know he's no longer here, but some of the older legends of reggae music, they will tell you that dancehall started in the 1940s and the 1950s, because dancehall really is a place like a club where you go and you listen to music. It's called a dance hall, or some people will now call it nightclubs or a club or raving place, a place of raving, you know, or what, you know. But in those days, it was called, the dance hall was called a place you go with your other half, of your spouse, or with just maybe by yourself or some friends to listen to some nice music, have a drink, maybe have a meal, and then eventually get on the dance floor and do some dancing and so on. And yes, and that is so true, because that is dancehall, but dancehall became synonymous with reggae music towards the end of the 1970s. Because what was happening towards the end of the 1970s, producers, to save money, they were actually making lots of songs on the same rhythm. So for example, for those of you who love Studio One music, Studio One were actually making a lot of songs using one rhythms, and this all started from Sugar Minott one day going to Coxon Dodd, the founder of Studio One, and saying that, look what I can do. Because as a young man, Sugar Minott had a sound system, and he'd sometimes, what he would do, he would sing his own, make his own songs up on some of the older vintage Studio One rhythms from the 1960s and the early part of the 1970s. And so Sugar Minott was able to adjust some of his vocalities and fit them around various older Studio One rhythms, and that formula became very popular in the Jamaican dancehalls towards the end of the 1970s, and by the early 1980s, and this became a thing. dancehall became known as part of a subgenre of Jamaican music. So it was still called reggae music. Some people call it rubber dub. Rubber dub is like a type of music where you go into the dance and you're a woman, a man's a woman, they dance tightly, and rubber dub rhythms are like what was popular in the early 80s, you know. And so, but dancehall was part of rubber dub, but dancehall became known as the actual music itself, with people like Yellow Man, people like Johnny Osborne, Frankie Paul, you know, Sugar. I mentioned Sugar Minott before, Frankie Paul, Johnny Osborne, and a number of other guys around from that time. Yellow Man, Brigadier Jerry, people like Josie Wells, you know, Rankin Toyin, all the legends that was around in those days. Dennis Brown, Gregory Isaacs, Hugh Mundell, Junior Reid, all the guys which were popular, all the artists and the DJs and the singers that were popular in reggae music around that time of the late 70s, early 80s. A lot of their songs at that time were called dancehall songs because of the dancehall, because of the term was used because of the rhythms and because of the time it was created in. So it was created in the time where dancehall, where the rhythms were revamped from old Studio One classics, of course, started by Sugar Minott, who went to Coxon and said, look Coxon, I can sing my own songs to your older rhythms from back in the 60s. He said this in the mid-1970s. So at that time, those rhythms were that old. They're only about maybe 7, 8, 9 years old at the time. 5 years old at the time. But nobody was doing it at that time. A lot of people going on new rhythms. But because the band at Studio One, which were called the Brentford Road Disco Set, which were a core of new musicians away from the likes of the Soul Defenders, the sound I mentioned, who were popular at Studio One in the 1960s. And the Soul Defenders was there in the late 60s, early 70s, and so on, which was the last great Studio One band, the Soul Defenders. After that, a lot of the musicians went their own separate ways because some of them wanted, because Coxon wasn't paying as much money as some of the other producers. For example, say a Bunny Lee, maybe a Joe Gibbs, and then eventually the likes of Joe Hookim at Channel One, 90, and even international bands like Chris Blackwell at Island Records and Virgin, which were becoming popular in reggae music when Richard Branson went in because he liked reggae music. After Bob Marley's big international success and after the success of the film The Harder They Come, then all of these, you know, Westerners, for example, you know, in inverted commas, like Chris Blackwell. Well, Chris Blackwell was in the music from the 60s, so he doesn't, and he's part Jamaican. But the likes of Richard Branson, who owned Virgin Records, became, you know, fans of reggae music after The Harder They Come with Jimmy Cliff, the film which were shown to the world, and Bob Marley's breakthrough as an international reggae Jamaican artist. So a lot of the Western companies, EMI is another one, they started to snap up and sign reggae artists to big contracts. So they like the music. So musicians would go, they also hire the greatest musicians in Jamaica to actually back those artists up as well. So reggae was becoming more international. So a lot of the guys who was at Studio One left to go to other producers in Jamaica or international, or would go to America to work in America. Some of them would go out of reggae and go into funk bands and soul and jazz bands. You know, a great case in point is Winston Grennan, who was one of the men who they said was responsible for starting Rocksteady in the mid to late 1960s. So anyway, I don't want to go off track. So that's what dancehall is. Dancehall is the rhythm, the updated rhythms. And as you can, some of you would know, the likes of Joe Gibbs at Retirement Crescent and the likes of Jojo Hakim at Channel One would revamp old Studio One and old Treasure Wire, not just Studio One, but all old Treasure Wire rhythms from the 60s, like the Rocksteady period, and even other obscure Rocksteady labels and producers' songs would get a revamp, would get a new lick, as it were, and would be adopted by the likes of Sly and Robbie for Channel One as part of the Revolutionaries, which was called Rockers and then eventually Steppers. Then the likes of the same core when they were working with the Professionals for Joe Gibbs and other bands at that time, you know, and then eventually the Roots Radix, who took over more or less from the Revolutionaries and the Professionals and would become the mainstay for backing as backing musicians and backing some of those early dancehall artists in the late 70s, early 80s. As I just mentioned before, some of those singers, but the backing band was now called the Revolutionaries. Not the Revolutionaries, the Roots Radix, led by Errol Flabber Holt and Bingy Bunny. Those guys would work with those artists from that time. So that's what dancehall is. Dancehall is a new rhythms, updated rhythms to older classics. and also artists singing over those vintage rhythms, but also those songs were popular in the dance halls. So hence the term dancehall, because those songs were the songs which were at the time, and to use the terminology from that era of the late 70s, early 80s, carrying the swing. Now we'll say these are the songs which are like, which are like dope, or which are like lit. These are what the young people are using, lit or dope or sick. But in those days, the buzzword for the youngsters in them days, 40 or so years ago, was called carrying the swing. So those were the tunes and those were the stars that was carrying the swing at that time. I hope I make myself clear to you. So brothers and sisters, that's what dancehall is, Dancehall started really around 1978. They say that the album from Sugar Minott, Live Lovin', from 1978 was the first dancehall album. And even though, as I said before, dancehall was in the from the 40s and 50s in dance halls where people go to dance and have a good time. Yes, but the actual coin for a subgenre of reggae music, started in, as I mentioned, when Sugar Mike went to Coxzone and said, look what I can do. I can use your older rhythms and make new songs up over it. So those old classic songs you had from a few years ago, and at that time it was about 75, he said, for 76. So this was just a few years before when Rocksteady was popular in reggae. So you're talking between the mid to late 60s. So this is only a few years after when Sugar Mike went to Coxzone and said this to him. So now he said, look what I can do. I can make my own songs up to your classic rhythms. Nobody had done this before. And so Coxzone said, okay then, let's do this then. Let's do it. Because the band at the time, the Breadth Road Disco set, according to Sugar Minott, wasn't saying anything. It was outdated. And so I said, use your old classic rhythms. Those are the vintage ones. I'll make my own songs up over it. So what would happen as a result? It'd have like a domino effect. So the likes of Johnny Osborne did the same formula. Freddie McGregor did the same formula. And then going into the 80s, the likes of Frankie Paul, Dennis Brown, Gregory Isaacs, as I mentioned, many artists before, they did the same formula. And even some of the more obscure artists did the same formula, using their own rhythms around old vintage rhythms. But at that time was updated by the likes of first the Revolutionaries, then the Professionals, then into the 80s, the Roots Radics band, and then eventually the High Times band towards around 83, 84. One of the last bands at that time to perform live in the studio. Then it went digital from 85 after the same tenor with King Jammy went viral, went worldwide. But now in 2022, and even like 10 years ago in 2012, the bands were starting to re-emerge back into Jamaica again. So they came out with a digital. They're still in the digital period, but now they say, the producers were saying and the musicians were saying, I think we should go back to having musicians now, live musicians in the studio, because this digital rhythm of computers can only go so far. We need to get that feel. We need to get the real feel of the music. So we have to go back to having real musicians in the studio, so artists can come and sing their songs, and we have proper musicians who know about music theory and so on. And so that's more or less it in a nutshell. Dancehall in a nutshell is older, is new rhythms being updated from older rhythms, and the singers singing their own songs to it. And those songs at that time were popular in the local clubs, aka dance halls. So hence why it's called dancehall music, because it's popular in the dances. And the rhythms were taken from the older dance halls and the older studios and brought back a few years later on. And man singing their own rhythms over classic vintage rhythms, but updated into a new style of music, but the same rhythms, but different energy, updated rhythms and different lyrics sung around. Sometimes they'll sing the same song over again from back in those days, a studio on classic, and they'll sing it over again, but using a different style. And of course, those singers were different style singers to the ones. If you listen to a singer in the late 70s, early 80s, they sound vocally different from a singer singing in the rocksteady and reggae period, because it's a different era now, and it's a different generation of singer. So they come with a different energy, a different vibe. It's such a long thing to explain. Reggae music can never be fully explained, and it can never ever stop here. It goes and it continues, and I only just try and do my best to explain things as much as I can. And one of these days, brothers and sisters, I'll talk some more about this. You take care of yourselves. Don't forget to share the word of Crispy and Motep. I'm going to do some more content again soon. We're going to be doing a content on Lee Scratch Perry. We're going to be doing a content on the likes of some other great artists as well, Bunny Wailer and some more. We're going to be doing top 10s as well, top 10 women, top 10 DJs, top 10 producers, top 10 studios, top 10 instrumentals, top 10 musicians, and so on and so forth. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Crispy Motip. Spread the word. Put your likes on the video because it helps with the algorithms and it helps YouTube to share our videos and to promote our videos, and so we get more subscribers. And leave your comments down below as well and tell us what you think and feel of these, you know, things I'm saying. And as I said, when we get to 1,000 subscribers, we're going to give away some prizes, and we're going to be doing some live videos in the next few months when we get our equipment. At the moment, we need some mics and some bits and pieces so that we can proceed and give you some live videos, so you can come. You can get up close and personal with us and ask us things live in a moment. So brothers and sisters, Crispy loves you all. You take care of yourselves. Peace, love, and guidance. One.